Have you ever imagined a simple bank deposit turning into a true life lesson? That's exactly what happened on an ordinary afternoon when a young black girl walked alone into a bank branch holding an envelope. What seemed like a simple task became a scene that left everyone present silent, including a certain bank employee. And everything changed even more when her mother arrived. Why are we still so quick to judge someone by their appearance today? And what leads some people to underestimate someone's intelligence or social status just because of their skin color? The truth is that many still carry hidden prejudices, rooted in the way they were taught to see the world. But when these prejudices are confronted with reality, especially by someone who holds power and authority, the shock can be profound. In this case, the bank employee not only had to deal with his own attitude but also with a public lesson he would never forget. Maya was only 12 years old, but she already showed a maturity that impressed any adult. She wore a simple sweatshirt, her hair tied in braids, and held a carefully folded envelope with her mother's name written in large letters on the front. When she entered the bank branch, the atmosphere, until then calm, subtly changed. She walked confidently to the service counter but soon noticed something different in the clerk's eyes. His name was Thomas. A bank employee for almost 15 years, he was known for his seriousness and attention to detail, but also for being excessively suspicious. When he saw Maya approaching, his gaze quickly dropped from her face to her clothes, then to her hands, and finally to the envelope. He forced a smile, but the discomfort was visible. Without noticing the silent judgment, Maya said politely, "Good afternoon, sir. I would like to deposit this amount into my mother's account." Thomas frowned. "And where is your mother, young lady?" "She's working. She taught me to make this deposit by myself. Everything is written down here, including the account number," she replied, handing over the envelope. He took the paper hesitantly, opened the envelope, looked at the amount, $2,000 in cash, and slightly recoiled in his chair. The silence between them lasted longer than usual. Then Thomas looked around, as if seeking invisible approval, and said in a harsher tone, "Look, I'm going to need the account holder to come here personally. That's a lot of money for a child to be carrying." Maya tried to argue. "But my mother said I could. She works nearby and taught me everything." Thomas crossed his arms, still holding the envelope. "Sorry, but I can't accept this. It could be anything. We have rules here, okay?" Other people in line began to notice. Embarrassed, Maya lowered her eyes. She didn't understand why there was so much distrust. It was just a deposit. She had done exactly what her mother had instructed. It made her feel small, as if she were doing something wrong just by being there. Then the bank door opened forcefully. A tall woman, with firm heels and an elegant blazer, entered with determined steps. Her eyes scanned the entire branch until they found Maya, still at the counter, head down. "Maya, my love, are you okay?" the woman said, quickly approaching. It was Gabrielle, Maya's mother. CEO of a rapidly expanding tech company, she was respected in business circles and often invited to women's leadership and innovation events. Before Maya could answer, Thomas intervened. "Ah, you're the responsible party? Look, we just wanted to make sure that my 12-year-old daughter wasn't trying to make a deposit into my account without my permission?" Gabrielle interrupted, calmly but firmly. Thomas tried to ease the situation. "It's just that, the amount. And she's alone." Gabrielle looked at him seriously. "Would you have reacted the same way if it were a white girl wearing brand clothes making this deposit? Or if it were the son of one of your colleagues here at the bank?" The silence was immediate. Other clerks tried to hide their discomfort. A security guard stopped pretending to fiddle with his phone. Gabrielle stepped closer to the counter. Maya has been taught since she was little to be responsible with money. She knows exactly the value of what she's depositing and why. The fact that she is a child does not justify the embarrassment. The judgment came even before you asked her name. Thomas tried to justify himself again, but his words were incoherent. Maya, who had been silent until then, looked at her mother with relief. Gabrielle put her arm around her daughter's shoulders and pulled the envelope back from the clerk's hands. "We're going to make this deposit somewhere else, but not before making it clear that what happened here today will not go unnoticed." She then turned to the other customers, who watched the scene in silence. Never underestimate a child because of their skin color or the clothes they wear. Not all prejudice is shouted. Sometimes it hides behind a badge. Gabrielle and Maya left the branch with their heads held high. The door closed behind them, but the impact of those words lingered in the air. Inside the bank, Thomas remained still for a few moments. With his hands in his pockets and a tense face, he stared at the counter as if something had changed, and it really had. That was an afternoon when a simple deposit turned into a powerful revelation. And although Maya left without completing her task, she and her mother left behind something much more valuable. A reality check. The next day started like any other at the bank branch. The same automatic doors opening and closing, the same hurried customers, the sound of keyboards, and the routine conversations among the tellers. But for Thomas, nothing was the same. The image of the firm, elegant woman and the girl with the hurt look stayed in his mind like an alert that wouldn't fade away. During the night, he tried to convince himself that he had only followed protocols. But the truth kept nagging him. He knew it wasn't just about a deposit. It was about how he had looked at Maya. About the silent judgment he made before even hearing what the girl had to say. When he logged into the bank system to close the previous day's transaction, his eyes fell on the account holder's name, Gabrielle Thompson. Out of curiosity, or maybe guilt, he decided to look her up. It only took a few seconds in the search engine before he found what he didn't expect. Gabrielle was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech startups in the country. There were interviews, awards, photos next to international investors, and reports highlighting her journey as a black woman in the corporate world. The headlines seemed to scream from the screen. Gabrielle Thompson, from self-taught programmer to innovation leader. The woman, changing the way companies think about technology. A mother, a leader, and an example of overcoming adversity. Thomas leaned back in his chair, feeling his stomach churn. The woman he had treated coldly was admired by great names. And the girl was her daughter. Intelligent, articulate, well-mannered. The guilt he had tried to hide now took shape. He could no longer pretend. Later, during lunch, a colleague at the bank casually commented, "Have you seen what's going viral on Twitter? The video of that woman at the bank went viral. Looks like it happened right here." "What video?" Thomas asked, trying to sound uninterested. A customer recorded the moment the woman confronted a teller for mistreating her daughter. Lots of people saying it was disguised racism. And you know what else? She's one of the country's top CEOs. Everyone's sharing it. Thomas stayed silent. He knew it was him in the video, even if his face wasn't fully visible. He felt exposed. But what hurt the most wasn't the external judgment. It was what came from inside. For the first time, he faced clearly what he had refused to admit. He acted with prejudice. That night, after work, he walked to his car slower than usual. He felt the weight of his mistake like a burden on his shoulders. The world kept its rhythm, but something inside him had broken, or maybe just revealed itself. Across town, Gabrielle and Maya were having dinner together. The little girl was calmer but still had questions. "Mom, why did he think I was doing something wrong?" Gabrielle thought before answering. Sometimes people see what they want to see, not what's in front of them. When they look at you, daughter, not everyone sees your intelligence or your courage. Some only see your skin color, your clothes, your age. But that's their problem, not yours. Maya slowly shook her head. "I did everything right, didn't I?" "You did. And that's what matters." The next day, Gabrielle received an email. It was short. An apology from the bank's management, stating they were aware of the situation and would take internal measures. No names mentioned. No intention to speak in person. Just formalities. She smiled bitterly. She had expected that. The system always tried to protect itself. But she was no longer the kind to accept comfortable silence. So she replied, "Internal measures don't teach empathy. I accept the apology, but I hope you've learned it's not just about company policy. It's about human respect." Thomas never received that response. But it echoed in the bank, on social media, and in conversations. And he, silent at his desk, knew the change had to start from within. For the first time, he was willing to listen. The sun hadn't even fully risen when Thomas arrived at the bank. He had slept little. His head was spinning ever since he learned that Gabrielle was one of the most respected executives in the country. And ever since the video of the incident had spread like wildfire across social media. His tired eyes revealed that, despite trying to follow his routine, he was no longer the same. As soon as he sat down, he received a message on the internal system. It was from management, a summons to a meeting at 9 a.m., labeled Urgent Matter. Thomas immediately knew what it was about. While waiting for the time, he watched customers entering. Men in suits, elderly women, young people with phones in hand. And there, for a moment, he thought he saw Maya again. Of course, it wasn't her. But that image of her frightened face and firm voice wouldn't leave his mind. At exactly 9 a.m., he went up to the manager's office. There were 2 other superiors there. The atmosphere was formal. One of the managers, the older one, started straight away. "Thomas, we received an official notification from the company's legal department and also from the press. The situation with the client Gabrielle Thompson has generated serious repercussions. The video keeps going viral. They are demanding a response from us." Thomas swallowed hard. I didn't want to discriminate against anyone. I just thought it was strange for a child to be alone. "But it wasn't a child alone, Thomas," the manager interrupted. "She was acting within the rules. You made a decision based on her appearance. And now the company is at the center of a national problem." The bank decided to suspend Thomas temporarily. They called it a conduct review. He did not protest. Deep down, he knew it was little compared to the impact he caused. Meanwhile, Gabrielle continued with her routine. But something had changed. Since the day of the incident, she had received messages of support from women, mothers, black people who had experienced similar situations. And also from strangers who confessed they had acted with similar judgments and were now rethinking everything. One afternoon, Gabrielle was invited to a talk show. The topic: subtle racism in public places. She hesitated to accept, but Maya, sitting next to her, held her hand and said, "People need to know, Mom." On the live show, she told the story without sensationalism. She recounted the incident at the bank, described the coldness of the attendant, but focused on something bigger. How small actions, decisions based on stereotypes, create invisible barriers every day. And how, even with achievements, it was still common to be judged before being heard. The impact was immense. Not just because of her position or influence, but because she showed that situation could happen to anyone. Or worse, that it had already happened to many but no one had paid attention. The following week, the bank published an official statement admitting the mistake. They announced mandatory training on diversity and ethical conduct for all employees. Gabrielle hadn't asked for this. But seeing concrete action brought some relief. On Thomas's side, the days felt longer. He felt ashamed to go out, avoided social media, and preferred silence to people's looks. Until, on an unexpected impulse, he decided to write a letter. Not a formal apology. Something real, directed to Gabrielle and Maya. He wrote it in the early morning, with difficulty. The words didn't flow easily. But gradually, he managed. "Gabrielle, Maya, I was unfair. I judged before listening. I acted based on something I didn't even realize I carried. I thought I was being careful, but I was being exclusionary. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to admit what I did." The image of Maya, firm, trying to explain herself, stays with me every day. I hope that one day she can walk anywhere without anyone doubting her presence, her right to be there. Gabrielle read the letter days later. She was in the middle of a meeting when the secretary handed her the envelope. After finishing work, she sat quietly to read it. She didn't cry, but she stayed there for minutes looking at the paper, thinking about the transformation that some people are truly capable of starting, even if belatedly. She didn't reply to the letter. Not out of disdain, but because she felt Thomas needed it more than she did. Maya never knew the letter existed. Gabrielle preferred not to tell her. The The girl had already learned the hardest lesson very early. And now it was time to show her that, even in a flawed world, some people choose to change. On Saturday morning, Maya woke up earlier than usual. The sky was clear, and the light gently streamed through the bedroom window. Gabrielle was already in the kitchen, preparing pancakes, something rare on weekends full of meetings and commitments. But that morning everything felt lighter. There was something different in the air. As if the cycle started at the bank was about to close. Since the episode, Maya had been more attentive to everything. She noticed how people looked, how they reacted to her presence. Even among adults, she perceived looks she hadn't noticed before. Gabrielle, for her part, began involving her in small decisions in her company. Smaller meetings, quick visits to the office, talks about leadership. It was a subtle way to prepare her, and also to show that her identity wouldn't be shaped by the bad experiences, but by the strength she chose to cultivate from them. The following week, Gabrielle received an unusual invitation. She would be honored by a business leaders organization for her public stance against the prejudice her daughter had suffered. More than a ceremony, it would be a nationally broadcast event. She hesitated to accept, as she always did when the matter involved personal exposure. But this time she was not alone. "Mom, you have to go," said Maya firmly, holding her notebook with notes. "You said we need to occupy spaces. This is one of them, isn't it?" Gabrielle smiled. And she understood. The girl who, weeks before, had been disbelieved at a bank counter, was now encouraging her mother to speak to thousands. She accepted the invitation. In the main auditorium of the conference, the seats were filled with executives, academics, entrepreneurs, and young leaders. When Gabrielle took the stage, there was no sign of nervousness. She wore a simple black blazer, her hair tied back, and in her hand, only a small note card she barely glanced at. She began by talking about Maya, the day at the bank, and the employee's reaction. But instead of dwelling on the mistake, she spoke about responsibility. About how leading a team, a company, or a family demanded more than goals. It demanded awareness. Watchful eyes. Voices that break the silence at the right moment. "Society still fails children like my daughter," she said, looking directly at the audience. "But it fails even more when it teaches those children to be silent, to accept it." Maya did not lower her head. She stayed firm. Because at home, we teach that dignity does not depend on the position of the person on the other side of the counter. The audience gave a standing ovation, not just for the strength of her words, but for her stance. There was someone there who was not just speaking, she was living it, leading by example. In the following days, excerpts of the speech circulated online, TV programs commented on Gabrielle's stance, and even schools began discussions based on what she had said. Unexpectedly, her voice echoed not only in the corporate world but also in homes and classrooms. Meanwhile, Thomas, still suspended, watched everything in silence. He no longer felt just shame. He felt something deeper, a discomfort from the inside out, as if something was being rebuilt. For the first time in years, he began volunteering at a community center supporting young people. Many of them black, like Maya. He wasn't doing it to clean his image. He was doing it because he knew it was time to learn what he had spent his life ignoring. Gabrielle never sought revenge. She also didn't demand public apologies or firings. She knew true power is not in tearing someone down but in standing up in front of everyone, and doing so with dignity. Maya, now more confident, began writing a small diary. There she recorded what she felt, what she learned from her mother, and the dream she had for the future. She wanted to be a scientist, but also wanted to create something big, something that would make a difference. Sometimes she wrote, "One day I want to be like her." Other times, she just drew a little girl standing on the other side of a counter, with a smile on her face and a backpack on her back. The bank where it all started changed. It revamped its practices, trained all its employees, and created an inclusion incentive program. Some people thought it was just a reaction to the publicity, but others said it came from something deeper. The impact of a child who stood tall, and a mother who, when needed, showed the country who really's in charge. If this story touched you in any way, Consider subscribing to the channel to follow other real stories that inspire, move, and make us reflect on the world we live in.